Okay, now I am. We got familiar with design thinking as a way to immerse in the pain points and problems and opportunities of the customers that we were solving challenges for. And that came in the form of design sprints. And so ever since then, we've been running design sprints. We're no longer in the product design and development arena. So now we just use design sprints as one of the tools that we help companies think through and answer the question, what's next? What might we improve in terms of the experiences we're excited to offer to our customers and followers and fans? And what happened was, after running sprints for about a year or so, we started to notice pitfalls and open opportunities to learn more and to ask better questions so that we could run better sprints, so that we can, cool. Oh, I just noticed Altaviz. Yeah, Altaviz, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. It looks like you're not connected to audio, so you might want to log out and come back in. And so design sprints became our sort of foray into innovation, strategy, research, building empathy-driven experiences for the customers who we were solving for. And what we noticed, hey, Christine, what we noticed was that there was this opportunity up front to ask better questions, to make sure that we were really understanding the problem that we were asked to solve within a design sprint, right? Because if you think about, for the designers in the room, the double diamond process, the first diamond to the left is all about problem discovery, and the one to the right is about solution validation. And so we use problem framing to help us reframe and understand which problems we wanted to work on. And ultimately that wound up as a next step being design sprints that led us to run better, more informed, more efficient, sometimes design sprints on really important problems that the market was looking for solutions to. And so that is my short story with problem framing. As a heads up, if you're interested in learning more about the, we'll see what kind of questions come up today, but if you're interested in learning more about the context of framing, when to use it, what it looks like, maybe we'll get into some of that today, but I'm building a course that I'm about to record for Envision. They have a new program called Learn, sort of like masterclass, but it's for, dedicated to their community of designers and product designers, UX researchers. And so that, I'm not sure when it will drop, but I'm recording it in New York in a couple of weeks. So that'll give a lot more of the background, as opposed to a lot of the talks that I give are more about the tactical. How does this work? What kind of activity should we do here? So I'm excited to be doing that soon. But the way that this works then is for the next 50 minutes or so or less, as long as there's questions, I'll answer questions, and then I'll just take the last 5 or 10 minutes and I'll show you the toolkit I've created, so that if you're interested in developing your own ability to lead problem framing workshops, I've created a toolkit that you can use, that you can purchase to use to facilitate and lead your teams. So without further ado, let me share my screen. And what I'll do is, let me put one more time in the chat here. So if you don't have any questions, or if you have a question but haven't added it there, I'd appreciate if you put it inside the Miro board. You could just put it inside of the one of the blue Post-its. Just create a new one for yourself, and I'll answer it today. That way there's this, what I've been doing is using, let me show you. What I've been doing is using Miro to capture all the questions that people ask on a weekly basis. So this is the 5th event that I've done. I do one per month on problem framing and one per month on design sprints. I'm going to do it. I'm probably going to introduce another one on facilitation. And so I've been capturing the questions that people ask each week in this board. And then what I do after this is being recorded. So as I answer each question, I then go into that question and I add a little pink Post-it with the place in this recorded session where I answered that question. That way, if you're interested in just getting answers to 1 or 2 specific questions, you could just click this link and it'll take you to that spot in the video recording within YouTube. And you can also get a sense of the questions that others are asking about, so you don't feel like you're the only crazy one. Problem framing is super hard. And then here are all the recordings I just realized, am I sharing? You are sharing your screen. Yeah, okay. I don't see the little highlighted bar. If you wanted to go back and watch the full recording, here are the first 3 episodes. I didn't record the first one, but episode 2, 3, and 4 are here. So if that makes sense, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and find a question in here. Let me just double check that I'm sharing the right thing here. Still, I'm not sure. Let me try one more time. Desktop 1. Yep. All right, that's it. Okay, so let me find a question here. So again, all the questions that have the little pink post-it note next to them have been answered already. These are from previous sessions. I think this is Becca, based on the initials, adding a question. So I'll get to that one next after she's ready. So let's find another one that has not been. Let's start up here with Tools Toolkit. Let's see. From Jill, this is from a previous session that I never had time to answer. So let me answer it now. So for those who don't know, there's a toolkit I've created that has training videos and resources and templates and guides to help you lead problem framing using the process that I've developed, which is about an 8-hour process or so that can be split up, out around a couple days. And one of the resources in the toolkit is the Facilitator's Guide, and it is what it sounds like. It's the thing that you keep as the facilitator in your back pocket so that you know what to expect, how to lead a step and the activity, where the group should be by the end of it, what things look like. And Jill here was asking, what does it contain? Is this written like a rough script for the facilitator to follow as they lead? So I thought I would actually show you what that looks like. And then I can send this to Jill and she can come back and see what we said. So this is inside of the toolkit is a PDF version of this guide. Some of the other materials I've added Keynote and PowerPoint files so that you can change things around to suit your workshop. This one, since this is how I teach it, and this is the process that I use and teach and have given to you, it's just a PDF so that you can follow along. And so you see there's a whole bunch of pages in the guide. And at a high level, what you're doing is you're being introduced to the toolkit, to the process, what you can expect. And then as we start to zoom in, there's some best practices around framing, but around altogether around design thinking, facilitation, change management. And then these pages here, the ones that have the little pink top, each of those represent a step within my problem framing process. So as you get into pre-work, there's a high-level overview of what you can expect, the why behind it, what's going on before the workshop. And then I take you through the steps for each of those activities. So you can see there's pre-work, there's step 1. I know it's zoomed way out, but there's step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and there's this bonus step, or 9, and then this bonus step of problem leveling down here. And so within each, I'll zoom into one so you can see what's behind. So let's go into step 1, which is called problem discovery. So in here, you can see that it gives you sort of this overview, these breadcrumbs about how much time you should be spending. My problem framing process targets 2 segments. One is the business, and then the second is the human or the customer that's currently experiencing the problem. And so this activity is focused on the business. It's fairly easy. And then any kind of overview information that you should know about. And then for each step, I give you the same kind of information. Why are you doing this? What's happening in general? Some of the key milestones and language that you should become familiar with. And then a step-by-step breakdown of how to facilitate and lead that activity for this step. And then you can see as well, the timing for each step is broken down. So the introduction with the initial prompt is 2 minutes, and then you give each person 1 minute to respond to it, and so on, and that goes. And you can see what it starts to look like. The problem discovery uses an activity called the SMART sailboat. So you start with the harbor, you move into the wind, the anchors and the icebergs. And so you start to get a sense for what this will look like, the prompts to ask the team along the way. And then any specific tips about this actual activity and the final outcome, what it should look like, where the team should be by the end of this step and this activity. And that goes on for all of the different steps, all the different activities. That's the facilitator's guide. So that's for Jill. And let's see. Looks like, I think this might be Becca's. Yes, okay. So Becca, let me see. Becca asked, what are best next steps? Post-problem framing. Great question. So what I like to tell, a lot of the time, people will ask the question, do you have to run a design sprint after problem framing? Or to Becca's more general question, what does it look like? Where do you go to next? So in general, problem framing is more of a strategic conversation. So what you're trying to do is where you are in the timeline of things is depends on the space that you're operating within, right? So if this is a totally new space, you might use framing in order to identify some opportunities that would then set the vision for the group to then go and unpack and explore specific opportunities within that sort of general theme. If it's a space that you're already familiar with, there's customers that you tend to know what their problems look like, but it's a new experience that you're trying to create or totally improve or change something that has already been created, then you would use framing to find the next opportunity, the next thing, the next pain point or challenge within that experience that you want to improve or altogether innovate. And so it's, as you can imagine, those conversations are happening really early in the process. And so those tend to be more senior, more strategic, more influencer type folks in the organization. If it's a startup, it's the founders, it's the founding team that's thinking about like, what do we want to tackle next? Or what's the first most important thing for us to tackle? And so when you get to the end of framing, what you should have is you should have alignment that this one thing, this one opportunity is the one thing that we want to tackle first or next. It's going to create the right impact. It's going to, for the company, it's going to create value for our customers. And so this is the thing that we want to tackle. And in order to feel confident that this is the right thing that we want to go after, let's make sure we understand what that experience is like today. Let's map out what that could look like and what we might want to, the pieces in there that we might want to fix. There's no solutioning in there. It's really about alignment and reframing the problem so that it's clear, so that it's actionable, so that as you bring other people into the process, they understand it, they can get behind it, or they can altogether say like, I understand it, I see it, that's not important for right now, or that's not the kind of target or the market that we want to go after. Or an engineer might come into it and say, this is going to be really hard because, but now it's really clear, which is very different, of course, from starting from a solution mindset. We want you guys to build this thing that does this, and these are the features, right? Not as creative, not as collaborative of a process when you start with the solution in mind. And so the endpoint most often is going back to senior leaders to say, this is what we learned, this is where we've aligned, this is what we agreed to. Our next step would be to do some additional research because there are some gaps in the conversation of what we know about the current experience, or we're really aligned, we're really excited about this, we've gotten some market validation that this problem is really important. We'd love to take this forward to do some prototyping, to do some ideation, to do some A/B testing. So the next step in an organization like that is a report back to a senior leader to share the outcomes and the decision points that the group has made. When I do framing, like I do most workshops, there's a visual construct in the background. I use a tool like Miro or Mural or Freehand, and I design all of the activities so that as the conversations are going on, we're capturing all of those ideas and questions and gaps in what we know today. So I would take an executive summary of that and bring it back to senior leadership or give it to the person who hired me. So it's a report, it's a request for moving forward. It's it's a call out of things that you're unaware of that you want to spend some more time doing some more qualitative research or quantitative findings. I hope that was helpful, Becca. Okay. Okay. And there is one more question. I've actually, oh, okay, cool. A couple more came in down here. Great. How do you keep, next question. How do you keep the problem framing work visible after the fact? Actually, okay, so this is kind of like a good segue between where we left off from Becca's question, which is to make sure that you're visualizing all of these conversations. You know, a PowerPoint or a slide or like a video recap, those are all great additions too. But the data for me, the capture of the conversation itself is what's most important. And sure, you might need to do an executive summary of it, right? So let me show you what I mean by that. So workspace. So when I say visual conversation, this is what my problem framing workshop looks like. This is a template that comes inside the toolkit if you wanted to run the process. So you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and there's this bonus step at the end, depending on where we're at with the problem at the end of the conversation. But inside, right, this is the first step that I was showing you earlier. So these are all the ideas that come out of it. And then we're mapping, we're deduplicating, we're asking questions, we're pulling out the insights from those conversations. And the close of one conversation is the start of the next conversation and the next activity. Right? And so when you zoom out of this whole thing, what you see is this conversation, these ideas that have been captured during the workshop. And so this is a living artifact, just like back in the day when I used to write 80-page business process documents that no one read. This is something that is visual. It can go on and live forever. The group can take it and clone it and do a follow-up workshop. And then, like I said, then you can do your sort of executive add-ons afterward to summarize the insights, the takeaways from this conversation. Yeah. So that's how I keep things current and fresh for people to come into and learn and build on top of. And then, for example, the output, one of the big outputs from, and maybe this is helpful, going back to Becca's question, one of the big outputs from, I lost my, here. One of the major outputs, I mean, all this stuff is helpful. Having a user map, like a field map of all the different users and stakeholders affected by the problem that we're talking about is helpful. Doing some proto-personas to help us understand and empathize with that person and what it's like, and then doing some kind of experience map to map out what it's like for that proto-persona to walk through that experience today. These are all super helpful ideas and visualizations for people to look at and ask questions and build on top of. And then what I do with a lot of these things is say if the next thing is a design sprint, I'm taking these things and I'm adding them into my sprint boards, because that is then the start of my sprint. Instead of, I don't have deciders in my sprints, but instead of the VP or the managing director standing up and just talking for 20 minutes, we prep together and he or she is talking with the backdrop of these artifacts behind them. And then lots of what questions, what did we miss? What ideas are coming up for you, and allowing the group to then sort of not start from this blank canvas or start by interpreting just a bunch of words coming out of somebody's mouth, but looking at the ideas that we came up with together and then taking them forward. So it's a much different start to my sprints than just that sort of 20-minute talk. Hope that makes sense. Okay, let's see. I think I saw a couple others down here. Shyam's is an old question. which I have answered. I gotta add my pink post-it to it. This is a new one. I'm interested in how to develop a problem hypothesis. Is this something you can cover or give advice on? Well, let's see. Problem framing for me means a few things. So there's prioritization, which thing, which topic, which problem, which challenge, which opportunity do we want to focus today on or the next few weeks on? So there's prioritization to find that next challenge. There's humanizing of the problem to make sure that we're not just solving things that are of interest to us as a company, as a team, but making sure that there's a human-centered problem driving that. Otherwise, people don't care about improving your onboarding experience. They care that it's easy and they don't have to wait a long time on with your customer call center or something like that. So identifying the human challenge behind it, and then finding the intersection of those two. And so the final piece is to reframe it so that it's clear and actionable. So there's a few different frameworks out there for articulating a problem so that it's clear, so that it's actionable. I'll show you the one that I use. And I've, like anything else, I've modified it a little bit. So I use this 5-part structure, and it goes, who's experiencing the problem? What's it about? When is it happening? What's the context there? Why is it important to solve to the user? And then you can definitely additionally add on, why is it important to us as a company to solve, right? So value, impact, and then how might we measure success? How should we know if we should keep going? Another question I get a lot is, I don't have 6 hours or 8 hours. I don't have the budget. I don't have the freedom to do something like this. What would be the first smallest thing I could do just to get people to be aware that we're 10 miles down the road, talking about 10 kilometers down the road, talking about solutions, when most of the team isn't really aligned in understanding what challenge? You could just invite the group to have some free time to answer these questions. So split them up, allow them to work silently, individually, and take them through this framework and just tell them, like if you were doing it inside of this template, you could say, just answer what you think we're here to talk about today. And what winds up happening is most times there's a fair to moderate degree of misalignment. So one person is talking about one customer segment, another is talking about another, or they're at different levels of abstraction of the problem. And one might be talking about specific solutions and another might be talking about what it would mean to the company if we were to solve this. And so allowing the group to just get clear and do this sort of rapid problem definition or problem hypothesis, to use your words, that will sort of shake the covers and allow the group to say, wait, I thought we were here to talk about this. And right. And then you can lead them through to make sure they can brainstorm or at least get a little bit of clarity around, why are we here? What are we here to talk about? That's the prototype, or sort of like the MVP of problem framing. And that's where we started years ago. And what we've done is just, you see more cracks in the pavement and you realize, in order to answer this, we need to get clear on this. In order to answer this, we have to unpack this part here. And so that's how the process became these 8 or 9 steps. Didn't happen overnight. I hope that helped. Let's see. This one looks new. Okay. What I like to do, by the way, in workshops, when there's a whole bunch of people, especially when I'm in workshops at 50 people, is I just shake my little Post-it. Hey, I'm over here. Okay. If I invite my devs, how do I keep them from going off and building what they hear in the session and staying on task as we define it later? Yeah, well, the good news is, oh, yeah, cool. Thanks, Becca. the good news is there's no solutioning in this conversation. When you're doing, one of the steps in the process is to do some impact versus effort or difficulty analysis. And I always describe it as you kind of have to stick a toe in the water of solutioning, because you have to imagine, especially when we talk about difficulty, but it's a very relative discussion. So you don't need to get engineers and architects and data scientists in the room talking about what this is going to look and feel like. But you do have to sort of peek. And it's more, the question that you're asking is, if we were to work on this thing, would it be more or less effort than working on this other thing? So you can see it's more like, it's more of a relative discussion. So you don't have to get super clear. And so like, to go back to your question, there are very few opportunities to be talking about solutions. Engineers are still welcome to this conversation, because if you decide to tackle, right, like there's different levels of complexity of problems that you can try to solve. And there's another activity in problem framing that allows the group to see the different levels of complexity, so that you can decide, we want the big moonshots, or no, we want some safe bets for now. And so as the group is having this conversation, as you're prioritizing and identifying that one problem, the engineer, I used to be a software engineer, the engineer is there for the feasibility part of the conversation. So you say, this is the one, we're really excited about it. And along the way, of the conversation, the engineer's job is to say, I know this is exciting. I know this would create a lot of impact. Our customers would get tons of value from it. This feels like something that's going to be really, really hard, really super challenging. So that's about as far as the conversation will go in terms of where a developer's mindset might be. What they tend to appreciate, though, is that they're a part of this conversation. And now, instead of being invited cold to say, here's some specs, go and build this thing, now they understand the context behind it. Now, as an engineer, now I understand why we're going after this thing, who the customer is, how they experience it today. So much more information than I used to ever get. I used to get just a document with a bunch of stuff to build, some instruction, and people to go and talk with to test it out with. So this is much more of an inviting process for them. I'm just trying to think if I answered that, because your situation may be different. Like as a next step, your question before, a next step may be prototypes. And depending on what it is that which problem you're tackling, a next step may very well be a technical prototype, like a proof of concept, or can we get these two services to even speak to one another? Can we find a data set that makes sense in order to solve this problem? I think those are more appropriate next steps. And so as a facilitator, you should frame that problem framing in itself is validation of the problem, but there's little validation of which solution, which there could be a broad number of solutions, which solution we want to tackle. But what we'd love, I'm speaking as a facilitator, what I'd love is if you join the next step, which is to join the design sprint, so that you can be a part of the conversation where we would identify potential solutions, right? So the design sprint would really take that sort of prototyping conversation further. But in between, maybe there's an opportunity for an engineer or a couple of engineers to pair up and do like budget a day's worth of paper prototyping, just to see what it would look like. So I would be really strict about like the time frame, and like, again, saying that we might have to check in with senior leadership to see if we were even allowed to take this conversation forward. Good question. It's always the engineers, right? We're always to blame. Okay. This is also an old question. If anyone wants an answer to it, what I'll do is I'll spend 5 minutes. I'll show you more about I'll just explain a little bit more about the toolkit. And then if there's any questions in here that I said are older questions, or that you're super curious just for like a quick recap, even though they have an answer, just drag a one of these +1s next to it. We'll get back to it. So let me just give you a 5-minute tour of what the toolkits are. So I've created 3 toolkits. The why of the toolkits is because I would do a lot of paid ticketed workshops. So you would have paid to come and learn about design sprints or problem framing or something else from me for a day or 2 days. And one of the requests I get every single time was, can we have the templates? Can we have the deck that you shared, the visuals, the resources, et cetera? I always would say no, because that wasn't included in the cost of the ticket. But ironic timing, right before COVID hit, October 2019, I started asking myself, what would it look like if I were to give the training and make it more accessible to people that can't pay, that can't fly to New York or fly to whatever area I was hosting the trainings in, or have access to the templates and then customize them and use them for their context, for their team environment. And at first I was creating a course, and what that wound up turning into is this toolkit, which is sort of what I consider a 2-for-1. So there's training of the framework, right? There's sprints and framing. So there's training of the framework or the method. And then additionally, there's the resources that I use. So, and I'll show you what's inside. There's resources that I use to facilitate and lead each of those frameworks. So you get both. And what I did was to help people understand what a toolkit is, as I define it, what it looks like, what some of the materials would be inside. I took the prioritization steps out of framing, and I created the problem prioritization toolkit as a standalone free toolkit. So if you want to see a toolkit for yourself and unpack it, it's a little lighter. It's definitely not as comprehensive. Things aren't as polished as inside of these two, which you have to pay for, but it does give you a heads up and of what you can expect to find in these two. So what it looks like behind the scenes is, for this, there are 17 videos. Most of the videos are training videos to teach you the process itself and the steps behind it. There's also a couple welcome videos to sort of unpack and continue what we're talking about here, which is like the process, what this looks like. All right, so there's 17 videos. And then there's a whole bunch of files, which are resources and templates. And so this kind of works like software. So what happens is, when I get hired to do problem framing or a sprint, I go back into the toolkit because I always make changes to the templates, to the guides, to the decks, to whatever I'm using. And what I'll do is I'll take them and I'll upload the latest and greatest inside of this thing. This is called Podia. So the toolkits live in a learning management system called Podia, which allows me to treat the toolkits as software. So every time I have a new version of anything, they go back into the toolkit. So you always have the latest and greatest. The same stuff I'm doing to facilitate is the stuff that's in these toolkits. And what's inside, so there's a facilitator's guide, which I showed you earlier. There's an agenda, which is built in Session Lab, so you can get a sense of the different activities and the arc of those and the timing behind them. There's a presentation deck that you can choose to share with the team so that they can follow along. There's some slides behind you. There's Keynote and PowerPoint versions, so you can change it if you'd like. I actually included the font files as well, so that nothing breaks when you decide to make some changes. And then sort of the workhorse behind the toolkit are the digital templates. So I've been showing you here, I've been showing you the Miro, one of the Miro templates. If I go back, you could see that inside there are there's 4 Miro templates. The same thing exists on the Mural side, same templates, just compatible with Mural. I'm working on a freehand version with InVision. And what else? And then there's a whole bunch of additional resources that you can use to level up before you do your workshop, and you can also choose to share them with the team so that they understand what this is going to be about, what it's like, so that they show up a little bit more willing to engage. So I've added links to a whole bunch of things that I've learned from or have created outside of the toolkit. And then again, here are all the videos that break down step by step what you should be doing. So it's kind of like me working with you, co-facilitating in the background so that you can watch the video, go through the facilitator's guide, look at the templates, and prepare and feel ready for your workshop. One more little quick announcement. If you want to attend, if you didn't get a chance to ask any questions, we still have 19 minutes or so, but if you have to leave at any point, come by newhaircut.com/events and you can see upcoming events that we have going on. Like I said, I do these two once a month, and I'm probably going to add one specifically for facilitation, innovation facilitation using design thinking, something like that. So that'll be a third that gets added to the monthly series. So if you want to come to a future one, the next design sprint one is in 2 weeks, and that is Wednesday, May 5th. Same format, and I'll go through questions related to design sprints, take you through the design sprint toolkit. All right, let's see. So that's all I had to cover as far as the toolkits. By the way, down here at the bottom of the mural board are just a few links. The toolkit itself, this free facilitation mini course, which sends you 30 lessons over 30 days to your inbox. And then if facilitation is something that you're interested in, you can click to subscribe to our bi-weekly video series where I interview heads of design, design leaders, UX leaders, product folks, and we talk about the skill of facilitation, how it's really hard, and challenges they've come through and how they've overcome them, things that they've mastered. Okay. Let's see. If anyone added any new post-its, feel free to wiggle it around. Okay, let me stop sharing and check the chat. Let's see. Cool, I don't see any questions. Oh, wait, I have to scroll down. Okay. Okay. So that's all I had. Tim, it looks like you just joined, but we're just about to wrap up. So what I'll tell you is, let me make sure you have the link because I'll do this again in the next few weeks and you can ask your questions there. Otherwise, you can also check the board. If you have questions, there's a decent chance I may have answered them previously.
Did you make a recording of this at all?
I did. So what happens is today's recording will go right in this pretty little pink box, and any questions that I answered today and any questions previously there are snippets to that answer in the little pink post-its. So if you see a question, you're like, that's exactly what I want to learn more about, you can just click the link and it'll take you to that spot in that recorded video.
Great, thank you.
And then if you have more questions, drop them in a new little blue post-it and join the next one, which will be probably like mid-May. And I'd love to get your questions then.
Thank you. I apologize.
Oh, all good. This is free. This is just meant to be fun. And I learn as much from fielding these questions as you guys. Okay, gang. Time for lunch. Thanks for joining. Thanks for always following along and asking great questions. I appreciate your time. I'll see you at the next event.
Thanks for putting this on.
Okay. Take care, guys. Have a great Wednesday.